Hello, welcome. I'm so honestly, Pete, you are the king of introductions, I think. It's beautiful to hear. And one, I do a lot of work around how people can help their staff with their mental health. But it's not just workplaces and big clients that I work with, but it's everyday like conversations. It's about when you're talking to your friend, it's about when you're talking to your child, when you're talking to your partner. How can you talk about mental health and create this kind of space where someone feels safe to actually say, I'm really struggling right now? And so it doesn't matter who you're talking to, these skills that you can learn around mental health are just applicable throughout life. And that's where I want to kind of start the conversation today, because I was trying to think really hard about what can I do in like 10, 15 minutes, like around mental health, because I can talk about it for days on end. And with language, I think it's a really interesting place to start, because what I've seen time and time again is that a lot of people will start to try and have conversations. So say, for example, you're struggling and you are just going through all this stuff. You might reach out to someone and try and just tell someone that you're struggling. But often we're met with either a bit of resistance, or we're met with certain language, or that person deals with it in a way that just shuts us down. Or we might not even be consciously aware of it, but they might say something and we just go, oh, I don't get it, or I don't feel heard, and you just stop talking. And so you've probably experienced that before, and you might be doing it to other people not even knowing as well. And there's such small nuances in the language around mental health that can completely change whether people feel that they can talk to you or not, and whether actually they come out of that conversation feeling comforted and feeling inspired about how to help themselves, versus feeling just really hopeless and spiraling from that. And so to keep it as simple as possible, because I'm very much around the simpleness of mental health, I've just got some examples around how we could switch up our language in just very, very small ways to change the nature of the conversations that we have. Now, before I do that, in a lot of the posts that were on LinkedIn, I saw it mentioned quite a few times about spotting signs. I feel like Pete's inner consciousness really wanted to bring out the spotting signs before we go into language. So I want to just put out into the ether, if you were going to have a conversation with someone, shout out at me, what kind of things would you potentially notice that someone was struggling? What might stand out to you?
I think it might be the lack of sign. So like somebody kind of withdrawing, not being very present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I always say pick up the phone to people who go quiet.
Yeah, that's huge. That's my thing. I always go very, very quiet.
And I'd also say kind of in that quietness is a noticeable change in normal behavior.
Yeah.
That's huge. Stuff that's out of character. So someone might be just generally quiet normally, but if they're usually very chatty and then they've gone really quiet, that's a change in behavior that we need to flag. Or vice versa. Maybe someone gets more talkative, more social because they're trying to avoid stuff. So there's, change of character is a huge one, Judy.
I was about to say overcompensation, sort of almost talking, too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you even think about it, when you're giving your 60-second elevator pitch and you just babble sometimes, or if you're anxious, you just talk and talk and talk and talk, and you're like, I have no idea what I just said. If you think of that in that context, it's what we do. Sometimes our just brains go on overdrive and just random noise comes out. Yeah.
So a sign I missed in the last 6 months with somebody was they were quite changeable, like a little bit snappy, and then they were really nice. And it was kind of, I was thinking, what have I done? And I realized recently by them actually opening up to me that they were going through a really hard time.
That's a huge feeling. There's two in there I just want to pick up really quickly. One, keep in mind that everyone's emotions respond so differently to distress. So some people will cry, some people will get very angry, and think underneath anger is pain. that reason someone's angry is because there's pain there. You know, when you see people in the street that are rude, people that are booping their horns in the car, and just like people that are, if you're coming out into the world as a mean person, it's because there's pain underneath. You know, and so that's it kind of brings to the second point, Fiona, so well, is that, you know, you often, when someone retaliates or like speaks badly to us or is angry or whatever, we think, oh, we get very defensive, don't we? It shuts us down because it triggers us, and we think, what have we done? And that is a massive stopper to conversations. And it's always kind of, you know, identifying that you've been triggered and going, right, this might not be about me. Let's try and find out why they've done this. And yeah, that's really powerful, Fiona.
This conversation is making me think about the Norwich City video. I don't know whether people have seen that, but it's absolutely breathtakingly powerful, that they've launched or released on World Mental Health Day. And it's basically two guys at the football, and they come to watch Norwich City every single week. One of them is grumpy and one of them's really cheerful. And then well, I won't spoil it for you. We'll put it in the newsletter.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the newsletter on Friday. I won't spoil it for you, but people should watch that video. I think it's very good.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a very powerful video, isn't it? It shocks you. And so, summary, before we look at the language now, that what you pulled out is so spot, and you know what to look for, right? And we don't always know at the top of our consciousness level, but being aware of, you know, changing character, being aware of that potentially is not always very visible. Someone might withdraw. If you remember, if they're angry, it's because there's pain underneath, and taking that moment to reflect on, maybe it's not about you, it's about them, and starting that conversation. And so we've got that kind of blueprint, and being aware of that everyone shows it very differently. So those close to you, just be aware what their distress looks like, so you can start these conversations. And then I've got some slides for you, because, you know, we all have a bit of slides. And then I've got a little video for you. Now, on this, I want to show you the comparison between two. And I'm going to ask you, what do you think the difference is between how are you versus how are you feeling today?
I think how are you, number one, is a bit white noise. Like, it's the sort of thing that you just hear all the time, and you have your own stock response. Whereas like how are you feeling today is much more precise, and it's asking for you to really think inwards about how you're feeling to actually come out with a more accurate answer.
Yeah, beautifully communicated, Sarah.
Thanks.
I think the first one is what I would call a closed question, whereas because you've added the feeling today, that's actually asking the person to elaborate and actually start a conversation.
Yeah, it feels like a real question, doesn't it? It's like that. What we do is we've got these like verbal nods, haven't we? Or, you're right, yeah, you're right, yeah, how are you? Fine, how are you? And we are just robotic with it, and we don't even give each other real answers. And so we operate on this surface level, and we've really lost a lot of connection. And something that has been a massive change since COVID is that our social skills have really, really dropped, because it's a muscle and it's atrophied over COVID. And so we're having to regrow it. And I'm seeing a lot that people are needing to relearn how to small talk. And that's why these networking in groups are so powerful, because they're giving us this opportunity to small talk again. And, you know, it's having that question. And it always sticks with me that someone said to me that when they were really, really struggling and they were going through a really difficult period of their life, they never spoke to anyone about it. And I was talking to them about why they didn't talk to anyone. And they said, well, no one asked me. No one asked me if I was really okay. And they were ready to talk, but no one actually asked them. And because we're so busy, because we haven't got the capacity, we just throw out these superficial, you know, like layer questions, when actually we need how are you feeling? So like Sarah said, you're putting that specifics on that, their feelings, you're asking them to focus on that, but also adding just the simple fact of today on the end gives it a temporary nature as well, because actually it's really heavy to say I'm feeling low versus today I'm feeling low. You know, it feels easier to kind of communicate across. So honestly, if we want to change the answers we're getting, we need to change up our questions. And so try this on your next conversation and see if it changes the answers you get.
Can
So
I just
yeah, go for
share
it.
a tiny thing? I know you
Yeah.
haven't got much time. My goddaughter's been really seriously ill. She's getting better. And she was saying to me how important it was that I was one of the few people in the family who remembered to ask, "How are you today?" or "How are you, what have your ups and downs been today?" She said, Mum, it's always like, "How are you? Are you better today?" And she said, "There's such a pressure with that of like, but I'm not better. I'm actually worse, Mum. And I now feel really shit talking to you about it. But you will just ask me, and I can say, it's been awful." As she was described in hospital as 50 shades of green. But she said, by that today, that finiteness gives you permission to open. So it's so much more important than we realise that just in this moment. So I just wanted to share.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank
I love that. I absolutely love that. And you're right, but we do go, oh, I hope you're well. I hope you're feeling happy. We load our questions with this, we want a particular answer. And so I love that you're giving giving people permission to actually go, no, today's a really bad day, and that's okay. I love that. So let's have a look at the differences around when we're talking about mental health in itself. What do you think the differences are between the left-hand side versus the right-hand side? So you've got they are depressed, they are self-harmer, they are bipolar, versus they have depression, they are a person who self-harms, and they have bipolar.
They're not being defined by their illness. So when somebody says they are depressed, that it almost makes it sound like they are always depressed. Whereas if they have depression, this is a finite thing. It will end with the right support.
Yeah, I love that, Jenny. And you don't go, oh, they are a broken leg. Like
Exactly.
And there are some physical health conditions that people assign to their identity, but with mental health, it's one of the things we don't want to assign to someone's identity, because they're so much more than their symptoms. They're so much more than their mental health condition, and it doesn't define them. Someone can have a mental health condition and live incredibly well. In fact, someone with a mental health condition can live better than someone without a mental health condition because of the way they manage their mental health. So it's not the mental health condition that's the problem here, and it shouldn't be the identifying factor. And if you think about it from the point of behavioral change, Judy's forte, if you are really looking at the fact that you want someone to improve, if you want someone to recover, if you've linked it to their identity, they're less likely to recover quicker. And so, if, for example, if you believe you are a self-harmer and that becomes your identity, how hard is it to switch that behavior and do something else? If you feel that you are depressed, how hard is it to switch your mood? And going back to our kind of conversation on habits, if you switch it on our head when you look at behavioral change, if you want to build habits into your life and you want to maybe run more, link it to your identity. I am a runner. Because we're more likely to act in line with our identity. So we can shape our identity in a really powerful way, but we've got to be careful how our language, impacts that. And so if you've got someone in your life who has a condition, or is self-harming as a behavior, not a diagnosis, but if you've got anyone in your life who's going through stuff, remember to make it something separate to them, and then that will help them to recover from that. So I got two more for you. What's the difference between I understand and that's understandable?
You might not actually understand if you've not been through it yourself. So saying that's understandable is a bit more helpful to the other person. Doesn't make them feel like they're being judged by your actions or your experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if anyone's ever said it to you and they're like, oh, I understand, and you don't understand, like you can't understand. And even if you've gone through similar experiences, they're never the same, are they? And like you have our own nuances of how we're experiencing it. And remember, when you're experiencing mental distress, you can often feel like you're the only one going through this as well, so which can often kind of put up that barrier again when someone says I understand. you want to go into that place of help me to understand, tell me what you're going through. And if someone shares what they're going through, that's understandable that you're feeling like that. It's more of a naturalization. So you're going, hey, look, it's natural that you'll be feeling like this after what you've gone through. So you're validating it more than trying to just assume that you understand what they're going through, which we never do. And so going that, and I always see parents, and I did it myself when I became a parent. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my life as a parent. Like I thought my life was completely different. No other parent had gone through this whirlwind of hell that I was going through. And then suddenly I realized that actually I'm not the only one. So we do, we do think that we're the only people going through these things. And so that understanding puts that immediate block up. And the last one, I've got a lovely video for you on this. But what's the difference between at least? So say, for example, you share with someone, my child is really unwell at the moment. And they go, oh, well, at least they managed to get into nursery the last couple of weeks before that, versus that sounds really hard. What do you think the difference is?
I feel like the at least is almost invalidating. It's kind of taking away from how hard that is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a huge one, isn't it? And we do it all the time. And and I've got the video that says it beautifully from Brené Brown on this, but we just completely invalidate someone's experience, when actually what they just need in that moment, they need to be heard, they need to be seen, they need to be validated, and that power, if you've got someone in your life that is almost like on repeat and telling you that they're struggling with stuff, and they're repeating, is often we repeat ourselves when we haven't been acknowledged and validated. So that simple sentence of going, that sounds really hard, or I can see you're in pain, I can see that's really difficult for you, just stopping and sitting in that pain. And Pete said it beautifully, which really is going to demonstrate in this video, of sit in the mud with them. If you can sit there, be with the pain before we quickly try and get them out, because that at least is trying to get them to see the silver lining and feel better, because either their pain feels uncomfortable for us and we don't want to sit with it, or we just want to make them feel better, when actually it's really powerful to sit with it, hold that space, which can be hard, before we start trying to reframe anything. And so I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and I'm going to share this wonderful video with you from the beautiful Brené Brown. Now, if you're not familiar with Brené Brown, go down a loophole now after our sessions this morning and just look her up. She's got books and videos and everything. She researches joy, shame, all the stuff. And she just communicates things in the most beautiful accent as well. And she did this talk on vulnerability, and she delivers talks to like C-suite people, so trying to encourage them to bring vulnerability into their leadership. And a little snippet, you might have seen this before, a little snippet of this talk was taken around the difference between empathy and sympathy, and how we can approach our conversations with empathy instead. And so have a little listen and watch of this, and then I'll come back to you at the end and ask you what resonated with you.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, huh? No, You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, "I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me." Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Isn't it lovely?
Lush.
What stuck with you from that?
I'd say for me, it's the line where it says, so often we try to make the other person feel better instead of just saying, listen, I'm so happy that you shared that with me. And I resonate with that so much, because really you feel the pressure to help the other person when they confide in you, when they tell you something. So really sometimes just be a listening ear.
You don't have to have that perfect response, do you? You can say, I don't know what to say, but I'm just so glad you told me. That's that real human response and that acknowledgement. I love that, Mimi.
I think being prepared to get uncomfortable with the other person.
Say that again, Fiona.
I think being prepared to get uncomfortable with the other person. That's why I wrote in the chat, sometimes there will be times when we can't go, how are you feeling today? And we can just manage, how are you? Because we know we don't have the capacity to sit with that person.
Yeah.
And I think, it's like the flipping oxygen mask. We sometimes have to cover, breathe ourselves. But when we can, don't do an in-between. Don't do a half-arsed job. Recognize if we can't, we can't. But if we can, to try and do it in a way that sits with the other person and says, I get that, or that's shit, or whatever.
I love that. And you're absolutely right. Don't ask those questions if you're not prepared to have those answers. You can't. If you're going to hold a conversation, you're going to need to be in that space, aren't you, in capacity to have it. I think, Chris.
Yeah, I would just urge people to not try and be the hero. And even when Brené says, I understand how you feel, sometimes I'll just say, listen, I'm here. I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm here, and I'll just be quiet and wait. And then at some stage, I'll just say, look, there's a ladder over there. What's the first step that we could take together today to get you to feel a little bit better than how you were a few seconds ago? And just sit and wait. But this is such a difficult topic. And if you feel that you are not qualified or you don't have the ability, hand them off to somebody like Rebecca, 116123 Samaritans. This is such a vital time to sit with somebody, but being the hero may not serve that person's needs.
Thank you, Chris. I think it's that kind of, remembering that we don't have to fix everything. That kind of often we go and take that fix it position, that hero position, where we go, oh, well, you've told me something now I have to do something about it. But remembering that person, by almost like taking that coach approach of going, what would be the most helpful step that you could take next, and giving them permission to have a small step is really powerful, because then you're empowering them to think, okay, what can I do to help myself, rather than trying to step in and be that hero and fix it all. But yeah. Thank you. Nice signposting. Good. Well done for knowing Sam's cool line off the top of your head, Chris. Well done. Brilliant. And Mark?
I was thinking about bereavement in particular, because often we kind of want to, if somebody's been bereaved and we see them, we're kind of reluctant to because we don't know what to say. But of course, often that person just needs that contact. And I mean, I've learned just, you can just come up to them and you don't actually have to say anything. They're just glad that, you've connected with them.
Oh, Mark, that's such a good example. Like, bereavement is the worst. We cannot talk about death as a society. Like, we are horrendous at it. And actually, you're so right, the amount of people who have been avoided once they've lost someone close to them, and no one talks about it, and it's this big elephant in the room, and then they suddenly feel like no one cares. But actually being able to talk about it, not making it the sole topic of your conversation with them, but actually being that person that can approach them, is a game changer. That's huge. One of my friends said one of their friends crossed the road and basically avoided them when they saw them after they lost their husband. But it's because we just don't have the capacity, and we're like, I don't know how to deal with that, so we kind of run from it. But even just being there, like you said, Mark, is such a huge game changer for people. Kelly, how about you?
That's really sad about someone crossing the road. I think people just don't know how to handle it, do they? Yeah, awful. I think by saying at least, we like minimize the problem basically. And we're just saying to that person, oh, don't think about that problem, pushing it down further. And then obviously you get the other mental health issues when you've pushed things away. So yeah, rather than saying, at least you've got this, try and empathize. Yeah, much more.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're right that when people are experiencing their problems, and the amount of people that don't go to the doctor because they don't feel that their problem is big enough, or there's a lot more people worse off than me, and we invalidate ourselves all the time. And so actually going, absolutely, your problem is very, very real to you. Like, especially with all the stuff going on around in the world, we go, well, look at all these different countries. They're going through so much worse than me. I don't deserve to experience this suffering. And it's giving yourself that validation that you feel how you feel, and that's absolutely okay to feel like that. And that's huge. It sounds like you all have this in your brain. So, and that's why I think with mental health stuff as well, obviously we go through the like mental health first aid skills, and every time I'm training this, I think, do you know what, this stuff that you will always learn new stuff, 100%. But remember that a lot of this stuff is this human innate skills as well. And often what we need is to just tap into that and remember that, one, the connection is vastly about what we need, but having the confidence to start the conversation is the key part. And that's what I find that mental health first aid gives people, is just the confidence. So if you take something away from today is, you don't have to get it 100% right all the time. If you get it wrong, if you say something that potentially jars with someone, if you use language that doesn't sit right with them, then apologize for it, acknowledge it, and just go, I'm sorry, I'm still learning. How would you like to talk about this? Ask people to guide you and just start the conversation. Know that from hearing all of your insights, you've got the skills and insights to start these conversations. So start them, because people will really, really benefit from that. And that is all for me.
Is it also worth saying Google is your friend? I mean, in this instance, to actually say, how do I speak to someone whose husband has died? Google has got articles we can read, and it just empowers us to know that we can hold on to something that we could say.
Yeah, I've done that before in a bereavement card before. I didn't know what to write. I was just, I'm terrible at writing in cards anyway, at the best of times, and I didn't know what to write, and I didn't want to get it wrong. And it a bit like starting an essay, right? It's just sometimes just getting the first couple of lines out, and then you're off.
Yeah, again, use a legit site.
Yeah. Mumsnet's great.
Wikipedia, but yeah, absolutely giving yourself that confidence to start that sentence. Gail,
I just wanted to kind of share something which other people might find useful. Is so over my career, I must have faced every bad thing that somebody, because at work, if you're a good HR people, it comes to your door, absolutely everything. And I've had years of sleepless nights worrying about what staff are going to do. And remarkably, one of my clients asked me to organise a mental health first aider course for their staff. And I thought, oh my God, I have never done this. And I didn't even kind of wasn't kind of completely aware of it. So after about 30 odd years, I actually did this course. And when that is the single most useful thing somebody could have given an HR person. Okay. God, it was a bit late. Okay. During those 3 days, every time somebody, the trainer described something, I had my friend in mind, in my head. By the end of the course, I had permission to ask, and I was on red alert as I left, and I drove to my friend's house and I asked the questions in the right order, which I've always been frightened of asking anybody. Are you having suicidal thoughts? Have you got the means? Have you thought about how you're going to do it? And had that conversation and had all the yeses. And it was the most, and this is my best friend. I've been worried about her for a long time. And I don't think I would have had the courage to ask those questions had I not been on the course and help her.
That's really,
so it's very, that anybody should do this course, anybody. Yeah.
That's so powerful, Gail. That's huge. And the amount of people who won't ask because they don't want to make it worse, or they're scared of asking. So many people don't ask around suicidal thoughts because they're scared that if they ask it, it will plant the thought in their head and then they'll start thinking about it. But the amount of people, I think 1 in 5 people will have suicidal thoughts at a point, and that is self-reported. Think how many people have thoughts of suicide and never talk about it. It's really, really common. And we need to take the stigma and the mystifying kind of aura away from thoughts of suicide and understand that it's something that brain does when we're experiencing distress. It's just a warning sign. Just like if we were eating badly and we weren't looking after ourselves, you might get bad skin. It's your body telling you that you're not looking after yourself, and your brain will tell you you're not looking after yourself as well by the thoughts that you have. And so let's just take away the fear and the stigma around thoughts and just know that it's just part of the experience sometimes. And the more we can get comfortable of going, it's okay to think about that, but the thought doesn't have to be anything more than a thought. We don't have to act on it just because we've had that thought. And then, having that conversation, what you've done, Gail, is you've given your friend that permission to be okay with the fact she's having those thoughts and being like, right, I've got a safe person I can talk to now. And that gave me goosebumps, Gail. It gave me goosebumps.
Thanks for sharing that, Gail.
Thank you, Gail. Ladies and gents, Rebecca Reed.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Becca.